And we're on.
And we're on. Hey, Greg. Hey, everybody who's paying attention on the interwebs. My name is Nate Swick. I'm joined by Greg, my colleague Greg Neise here at the ABA. And it is time once again for the mostly bi-weekly What's This Bird Live. It has been a minute. Sorry for the long...
Or two.
Or two. Sorry for the long lingering wait between the last one. It's been about a month. We've been meaning to get it up, but there have been a lot of things going on, various ABA issues, busy stuff going on. We've got a lot of exciting things happening. People out of town, illnesses. There are illnesses involved, although we're not going to let that stop us today. What we're here. We're ready to talk some rare birds, and just per usual, I will give a little roundup for what you can expect here. We at the ABA, we manage a group on Facebook called What's This Bird? It is essentially a crowdsourcing bird identification community. What you can do is put up a photo of a bird, and our friendly managers and friendly members will help identify that bird for you. What that means, though, is that we frequently see a lot of kind of interesting identification issues that pop up from time to time throughout the year. And Greg and I like to come on here every once in a while and talk through some of those issues, pull up some of the more interesting birds that have been posted in the last few days. And that's what we've done. That's what we've got. But while we're sort of waiting for people to arrive, Greg, how you doing? How's spring coming along in Chicago? We're in it. Like, this is it. This is it. The spring that you have been waiting for. This is the week across much of North America when it really starts happening.
I mean,
what have you been seeing?
You know, from in the ABA area, from the third week of April to the end of May that's it. And
that is the time.
This is at least in the Western Great Lakes. I mean, you were before we went live here, Nate and I were talking, and they said that the weather's been pretty dry and on the eastern seaboard, and
down here we've had very little rain.
We're having again a really cold, wet, raw La Nina influenced spring, and
I feel like we talked about that last year about this time too. It seems to be the regular spring thing, or did we? I don't remember.
That was 2 years. That was 2 years ago.
Oh, so it
was 2020, and then 2021. It was really warm and dry, and the flowers crapped out really fast, and by the time May 15th rolled around, it felt like June. And I remember
that's what it usually is down here.
Well, yeah. I mean, I remember going out on May 15th to an area that is usually just gangbusters. This is a place out on the Mississippi River where if you bird it well, you can walk away with 28 species of warblers without trying too hard. And we worked it, and we came up with 11 or 13. And last year was just not the year that this year is shaping up to be. And I see from reports from everywhere from the Great Plains through the Great Lakes and New York and stuff. It's just and down south, just all kinds of great birds, lots of vagrants. We had a really interesting big weather system with strong west winds that blew all kinds of western vagrants in during the middle of April.
Yeah, I saw Wisconsin has had a ton of really cool birds all of a sudden. Sharp-tailed sandpiper and long-billed curlew and gargany. Well, this is like the time of year for gargany. Gargany shows up in the middle of the continent. It's like late April.
And long-billed curlew, strangely enough.
I was surprised there are only 3 records of long-billed curlew for Wisconsin, to be completely honest.
Yeah, there's only 2 for Illinois, and the second one.
It's wild considering how regular
2 or
they
3.
are, not too far to the west of you.
And that's true. And the last one was on Montrose Beach, of course. At the same time of year in late April. But I think what we've learned from tagging those birds with GPS transponders is that they fly over the Midwest. They fly over Illinois, the birds that winter on the Gulf Coast, but they just don't stop unless they're knocked down by a storm.
Yeah, I was in Kansas earlier this month, giving a talk at a lesser prairie chicken festival, which was fantastic. By the way, got to see the prairie chickens doing their thing on the lakes, which is a really special experience. But one of the birds that I was actually kind of looking for was long-billed curlew, and they were seen in some of the refuges around in central Kansas, but we never touched base with them, despite seeing a ton of other migrating shorebirds, like loads of long-billed dowitchers and both godwits and things like that. A lot of cool birds, no curlews, but yeah. Stephen Williams says on YouTube that Tennessee is packed with warblers. That seems to be my interpretation of events here in North Carolina as well. People are seeing a lot of stuff. I unfortunately am not able to get out right now because I have COVID. So thankfully that it is not transmissible through the internet. Although with this new Omicron variant, who knows?
Who knows?
So I've been stuck at home for the last few days, which has been an unpleasant way to spend the spring. I appreciate all the well wishes. I am feeling a lot better. Every day seems to be getting a little bit better, and I am currently hopped up on cough suppressants. So hopefully I will not be hacking up a lung throughout this conversation that we have right here. But
well,
yes,
you've got your comfy quarantine room there behind you.
That's right. Yeah, this is the room that I've been stuck in for the last 3 days. Yeah. So this is not a great time of year to get COVID for sure, but hopefully it'll clear by biggest week and I can make up for it when I head up there. Fingers crossed.
Want to give a shout out to Judy, Mia, and Efren on Facebook to just popped in to say hi. And in addition to talking about the photos that we're going to pop up here and kind of chat about a little bit, if you guys want to talk about anything, if you guys have any bird related stuff, that questions or just something you want us to bring up and talk about, drop it in the chat, drop it in Twitter, and we will do our darndest to get to it.
Absolutely. Love talking about birds with Greg, and love talking about birds with y'all through the internets. It's those. Throw us any sort of questions, comments. We're going to roll through these pictures, and then we can pause at any point and tackle questions that y'all throw at us.
All right. Well, I maybe jump into the first one here and see what happens.
Do the thing.
It's been a while. Let's see if this doesn't.
It's been a while. We don't know what we're doing here. This is all new. Yeah.
I'm looking. It's like my Stream Deck keyboard has a little fine layer of dust on it from not being touched for a month.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. All right, this one comes to us
this
from
is a cool bird.
Wayne, Pennsylvania.
Oh, it looks like a gray wagtail.
It is a gray wagtail. Look at that tail up in the air.
Gray, that white on the face. Yeah. This is a really neat bird and a really fun way to discuss one of the great truths of birding. That is, you can't always trust plumage. But what do you see here, Greg? I'll let you take lead on that.
I mean, go ahead. Me with my experience with looking at birds like this, I immediately know that it's not something that the plumage might suggest, and that is a gray, black, and white bird. So I'm looking at structure here, and we can tell basically how big this bird is from the surroundings. But it's got a thin tail. It's got a thin bill. It's got a long tail. It's kind of sitting there with the wings drooped a little bit and the tail cocked. And that is a really classic shape and pose, structure and pose for one bird that's pretty common, showing up pretty commonly right about now in much of the eastern half of the ABA area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for sure. It's and I understand why people are confused by this thing, but it does look like a gray catbird that is got some plumage issues going on here. When you're identifying birds, I think it's very tempting to start with the plumage because that is the most obvious thing that you see. But I found that, as I've kind of worked my way up from being a novice to a somewhat skilled birder, I find that I use sort of what old heads might call jizz, general impression of size and shape, gestalt, just sort of like the feel of what a bird is, the experience of seeing a bird. It's a really kind of a difficult thing to describe. But a lot of the things that Greg was talking about, the long tail, the kind of pot-bellied look, the way that kind of holds the tail, the thin bill, all those things kind of come together to give me an impression of a gray catbird.
Yep.
And you know,
that's what that is.
Yeah, and you know, structure and behavior and all that stuff are oftentimes much more obvious clues to a bird's identity than plumage, because plumage can change, as we can see with this bird right in front of us. Sometimes it can change in pretty drastic ways, and but the structure and the behavior and all that stuff almost never changes. I mean, that is the stuff that stays constant throughout a bird's lifetime, and you know, whenever you're going to see a bird. So that should be the first thing you look at. And if something is weird about plumage, don't let that throw you too much. That shouldn't be the only thing you think about when you're identifying a bird like this.
Exactly. And also, you know, as you learn more about not just the structure and the gestalt, as Nate said, of individual birds, you start to learn the gestalt of families. And this is one of the Mimidae, you know, called mimic thrushes, that include northern mockingbird, brown thrasher, well, all the thrashers and mockingbirds and catbirds. And these birds have basically two modes: ultra secretive, where they're just forget it, or just bold and sassy. And, you know, when they come out, they're out on the lawn with their tails cocked and their wings drooped, and they're like, hey, catbird in the house.
Catbirds are good for that.
Yeah. So, and once you learn that, you know, it's, you know, you can pick it up just by silhouette and habit, that what this bird is going to be.
For sure. Yeah. And I think this sort of plumage abnormalities are more common in a lot of species than people frequently see. I know, you know, once you start looking at a lot of birds, you see this stuff happen quite often. You know, frequently big flocks of blackbirds and whatnot are great places to see this sort of weird, random white feathers. Though I will note, it is really sort of fascinating how when birds have this sort of leukistic issues, how frequently that face is the thing that is this pale, that almost like chickadee-like pattern, with a cap in the chin, and then the face part is actually the pale part. That's like a really common pattern for leucism. I don't really understand why that is. I just think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I don't know if it's directly related to feather tracks. Like, you know, there's different feather, because I think there's like in this bird, there's, I don't know, maybe 3 different feather tracks in the face that are white.
Yeah, maybe
the auriculars and the malar and that back of the nape area, but it's hard to tell from the picture exactly. But you can certainly see the black cap on this bird, which is also another mark in favor of black cat or gray catbird. Sorry. We got a couple of questions. Steve Schneider,
let's do it. Let's talk some questions.
Steve Schneider asks, are there other fruits beside oranges and grape jelly to attract migrants like orioles? Well, you know, if you go to if you search up on Google the Panama bird feeder cam, it's at the Canopy Tower, friends of ours in Panama, and you will see their feeding tray is just littered with all kinds of fruit. And they get all kinds of birds coming to all kinds of fruit. However,
I don't know. You know, we don't feed fruit all that often in North America. It really is more of a neotropical thing. I think there's just more fruit-eating birds down there, and that's the main part of it. But, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with experimenting in your own food tray and seeing what works. You might be surprised with what you can have. Well, you know, famously down in South Texas, there was a winter Texans by the name of the DeWinns, and their property is now a protected area down on the border. But they used to famously like put marshmallows and like chicken skin and stuff on their bird feeders, and it would attract brown jays most famously, but a lot of other kind of cool birds. Can't hurt to try. You know,
thrushes love apple halves, apple quarters.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
So we've got one more question here. Efrain Montoya in Chicago says he's very new to bird watching. Is morning? Oops, we got another moved on me here. Is morning and late afternoon best for bird watching? Also, I have visited the Montrose Bird Sanctuary a few times and have found a variety of birds. Are there any other areas that are good for birding? Um, well, yes and yes. Morning and late afternoon is best. Like us, if we had the opportunity, we would all be taking a nap at midday. And those of us who are lucky enough to be able to do. And the birds
I think,
are no different.
morning is generally the best time for birding, just because birds have been sleeping all night for the most part, and they need to get up and they need to find food and get their energy up again. I don't know. I suspect that midday slows down for birds quite a bit because the light is stronger and it makes it easier for things like predator birds to find them. I think part of the reason that they kind of slow down that in the middle of the day is because of that, but that's just suspicion on my part. I don't think there's any actual ability. But yeah, morning is always the best because that's when they're looking for food, and late afternoon is also very good because they got to get a lot of food before they sleep for the night. So you never go wrong kind of working around when birds eat.
Yeah,
and thinking about what birds eat when you're looking for birds. It's really useful birding tip.
Also, in answer to that question, I am going to drop a link in the chat in response to Ephraim's question there. And there we go. So check out that link I just dropped for you. And that is a guide to birding Illinois by county. And there's a lot of good places in Cook County around Chicago, especially the Chicago lakefront parks and so on and so on.
There you go. There you go.
All right.
One last question. Should we do that last one real quick? From Jennifer Toms.
Oh, sure.
She said she would like to get better at Hawk ID. She's looking at 3 books. If you are familiar with them, can you rank them in order? Those books are 1, Hawks at a Distance. That's Jerry Ligori's book. 2, Hawks from Every Angle, also Jerry Ligori's book.
Mm-hmm.
And number 3, Hawks in Flight. That I think that's the Sibley book, isn't it? The one with the Sibley illustrations. And Clay Sutton, I think, is the other author on them. Boy, it's hard to pick those. Those are like 3 of the classic hawk watching
they are
in birding literature, and honestly 3 of the best family specific guides to birds period anywhere in the world. I don't know if I can rank them. Like, they're all so different, but they're also useful. I love Jerry Ligori's stuff. Hawks at a Distance and Hawks from Every Angle are like just unbelievably useful. Because Jerry understands how you see hawks, and you don't always get like the best looks at them. And that's probably where I would start with. And then Hawks in Flight, it's got Sibley and it's got Clay Sutton, and I forget there's a 3rd author on that one too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, it's fantastic. Like, you got to get all 3 to have a complete birding library.
And Hawks at a Distance is particularly useful because it's immediately humbling when you look at those pictures.
Yeah, that's what Jerry is good at. Like, he does not sugarcoat it. Like,
he does not.
This is what hawk watching is like. You look at your field guide and you get these beautiful illustrations or beautiful photos, and it's like, oh, this is easy. This isn't too bad. And then Jerry comes along and says, like, no, that's not what you're identifying. You're identifying this speck that's like 3 kilometers away. This is how you identify that. And that is that's really good stuff. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna push on here with the next picture.
Moving on.
Okay, this one comes to us from Twitter, and it's a picture that the photographer.
Elon Musk send it? I heard he's
really... No, the photographer was not really asking what it was, but was talking about just what a bad picture it was, a bad angle, and I completely disagree. I think this is a fantastic photo of something that people see a lot this time of year and don't understand, and it confuses them. And so what we're looking at here is a Cooper's hawk, an adult Cooper's hawk, in its nuptial display flight.
Display flight.
Yes. He's feeling randy, and he's up there showing off.
Yeah.
And those white plumes on the side of the rump are the undertail coverts, and they floof those out, and that's a technical term not to be used lightly. They floof those out, and they have this strange moth-like rocking flight as they do this, and they don't look like any. If you're not familiar with it, they certainly don't look like a Cooper's hawk. But you see that flash of white as they turn, and it's almost always, it's very often confused with northern harrier. But from this angle, you can see it's not the rump. It's the white undertail coverts that are being extended around the rump.
Yeah. Nuptial display flight of the Cooper's hawk.
That's
and
right.
if you see this guy going around, sometimes you'll hear them yakking too.
They're loud.
Do this. Yeah.
It's like the pileated woodpecker of the sky.
Indeed.
Boy, it's getting bad here. All right, we're going to move on.
Sky. Are you suggesting that pileated woodpeckers are flightless?
No, I'm
Greg?
not. No, I'm not. So I said it's bad. All right.
They do spend a lot of time on the ground for such a large woodpecker. That is true.
Well, hey, ever seen Cooper's hawks run like a chicken? I sure have.
Oh,
Or a
chicken
velociraptor is more
hawks,
likely. They run around. All right, so our next one comes from northern Florida, and
I like this picture because when I first saw it, I was like, "Ooh," and then I was like, "Oh."
Well, I like this. I like this picture for a couple of reasons, and one is the "oh" factor, and the other is that this is it's not an aberration. It's a situation that happens not so frequently. What's that?
I was going to say, put that on a book blurb.
Yeah,
an aberration, but a situation.
And so, sorry, let's get, the bird is in the grass. We can tell how big it is because of the size of the grass. It's a small bird. It's on the ground, which in this case doesn't really mean anything. We're just going to cut to the chase.
All right, cut it.
This is a warbler.
Indeed.
And this time of year, and especially in northern Florida, and what's interesting about these kinds of birds is that they're, at least anecdotally, I remember they're very often seen in Florida.
Yeah, well, makes sense.
This is a Cape May warbler, and the key thing here to identifying it as a Cape May warbler is the bill shape. The Cape May warbler has this slightly decurved bill that is rather just kind of unique among warblers. Now, it's got other things that will also key us in to Cape May warbler. But the reason I wanted to talk about this bird in particular is because it's holding on to juvenile plumage. And at this time of year, and especially in a place like Florida, you don't expect to see almost any of our warblers, except for the ones that breed in Florida, to be in juvenile plumage. And to be clear, we're talking about the very first post-down feathers, which warblers molt out of on the breeding grounds. So unless
before we get too deep down this this rabbit hole, which I do want to explore, Greg,
yes.
I do want to talk just briefly about some of the confusion species that you might
go ahead.
Cape May warbler for. So when I went ooh, my first impression was like, is this a Kirtland's? Because that's a really streaky warbler, and they walk around on the ground a lot. But it, obviously they are a bit bigger bodied, a bit chunkier, do not have the curved bill like that. Another possible confusion species, myrtle warbler, very common in Florida right now. Some things that don't stack up for myrtle warbler. The eye ring doesn't look quite right. Again, the bill is a problem. Myrtle warblers tend not to be this streaky, though. They tend to be much more plain underneath, and a lot of times they'll show a little bit of yellow underneath the wing like that, unless they're in juvenile plumage, which is maybe what you're going to talk about. But that I wouldn't expect juvenile plumage in northern Florida in April.
Exactly.
Oh, and another one, someone suggested in the comments, American pipit. Another interesting species for this one, but body shape is relatively wrong. I mean, this is a little more compact. Pipit is a little bit longer.
Pipits tend to look kind of pigeon-headed.
Much darker. Yeah.
But also the face, you'll notice that there is a blackish line that goes from the base of the bill through the eye and behind the eye. There are dark lores and a dark eye line. American pipit has a very open face with pale lores. It gives it a very, not a startled expression, but a more gentle expression. Exactly.
There you go. And also, kind of fun, I don't know that I've ever seen a pipit in grass this long. An American pipit in grass
I've
this
seen
long.
Sprague's pipits in grass this long.
Yeah, exactly.
But not American. They like beaches and
you know,
mud flats and things.
yeah, and I know, golf courses and sod farms and stuff like that. But also, northern Florida, great place for Cape May warbler because they winter in the Caribbean. They're one of the Caribbean wintering warblers, and so when they migrate up north, they just the whole population kind of barrels through Florida or over Florida sometimes. So yeah, it's a good bird to look for this time of year in that state.
Absolutely.
Anyway, go down the rabbit hole, please.
Well, the rabbit hole here is that for whatever reason, and it tends to be seen more in the Southeast, in particular in Florida, just in my recollection. A very small number of warblers retain juvenile plumage. And so in the December 2015 issue of Birding Magazine, those of you who are Birding members and can get that online from us, there was an article about juvenile warbler plumage. And it delved deeply into that plumage that we never see in the field unless we are literally on the breeding grounds. In the case of Cape May, that's like northern Alberta.
Hard to get to.
So here is a juvenile Cape May warbler on the breeding grounds. You can see how the color is just that dark gray. It's got lots of streaks, and it certainly doesn't look like any Cape May warbler. The inset on the right, you see the tail pattern. That is what we're used to seeing on the tail of an adult Cape May warbler. And also the wing panel with the green edges. That's another clue to Cape May warbler. Now the inset on the left is a first year or female Cape May warbler. That's what we're used to seeing. That's that's when we think of a drab Cape May warbler. It's got a little bit of yellow on the hind neck. It's got some streaks underneath. It's got an obviously green rump, maybe a little bit of yellow or green here and there. But it doesn't look like that.
Yeah, that's a dark bird.
Yeah. So, ABA members, Birding Magazine, December 2015. If you want to dig into that, get in there and grab that issue and check that out.
Some exciting news about those older issues of birding coming up.
There is, and it's a fascinating article, and there's a photo quiz in there of like 6 or 10 juvenile warblers, and boy, I think I got 2 or 3 off the bat without really studying.
I'm glad we don't see that plumage very often in a lot of birds. Those could be really tough.
Yeah. Okay, on we go. Look, another warbler.
Another warbler. This one from Marblehead, Ohio. This one's one of my favorites because this is like the chameleon warbler that gives you about 1 million different looks, and people are always confused by it. But some things that stand out to me on this bird. Well, it's a warbler, and we know that even though it is a very kind of heavy-bodied, heavy-billed warbler, the bill is not quite as strongly hooked and stout as we would expect in a vireo, so we can rule that out.
Why isn't it a ruby-crowned kinglet?
Well, that's a good question, Greg. Proportionally, it just does not say kinglet to me. Proportionally, that head is much too small compared to its body. Kinglet is a very big-headed bird that has a little tiny straight bill. This bill is a bit too heavy for that. Even though I can't really get a lot on size, and I've said this before in this spot, when we talk about size, a lot of times what we're talking about is proportion.
Right.
And the impression of something being large or small, where a ruby-crowned kinglet is a very large-headed, small-bodied bird that gives the impression of being very petite, whereas this one does not have that. I get the impression of not a large bird, but a larger bird than a kinglet.
Yes, and kinglet also has a shorter tail, and it has kind of a unique. Kinglets have kind of a unique wing pattern, and they have
they have some yellow in the
whitish.
wings. Yeah.
Whitish greenish wing bars with a third black wing bar at the base of those. And we would certainly be able to see that here if that was the case.
Yeah, they have quite a bit of yellow in the flight feathers as well. That shows up as kind of yellow stripes in the
very
in the wings
greenish
and tail.
yellow,
and they're always flicking their wings too, so you get to see that pretty readily when they're moving. But the things I do see in this bird, I do see 2 wing bars here, even though one of them, the top one, is rather subdued. I see a nice broken eye ring, pretty strong here. Not seeing a ton of other features on it. But the ones that I do see, the eye ring, the wing bars, all that stuff, that it leans me towards a young, I don't know how young, or a female type pine warbler.
Yep.
Which is a bird that gives people fits this time of year.
It is, and this is a plumage that we see often in the spring. And one other thing that sticks out to me here is that pale area behind the ear patch, the auricular. On the nape, sort of on the side of the nape. It looks like it's shadow shading, lack of shadow or whatever, but they actually have that, and it's subtle. But pine warbler usually has that pale patch behind the auricular.
Sorry, I just lost my hearing. My earbuds. I'm trying to mess with them. I shouldn't have done that. Give me a second. We'll go to the cans.
There we go.
Yeah, these always work. Never trust Bluetooth. I got nothing else to add. Pine warbler is we see a lot of them down here. I got one more thing to add. Is it carrying something in its bill? Do you think this bird
it
might
just
be?
Looks like the bill has dirt on it, which is another mark against kinglets.
Yeah. Well, pine warblers breed very early. At least they do here, and I could imagine seeing one already feeding young this early.
Absolutely. All right, we're and this is a yearly thing for us.
Oh, we get this every year.
Every year, and it's one of the most commonly mistaken pairs of birds, like confusing pairs of birds, I should say. So what do we got here, Nate?
Yeah, so we have a small brown bird. It's very streaky, very strong eye stripe. It's got kind of pinky brownish pink legs. I don't know if those are going to tell us much. Small brown bird near water. This is definitely going to be one of the 2 water thrushes. We have 2 in North America. Well, there are 2 in the world. Northern and Louisiana. They frequently cause a lot of identification confusion, those 2 birds. So let's talk about how we want to break those apart. So the classic sort of field marks for Louisiana versus Northern are you want to look at the bill, the size and shape of the bill. You want to look at the extent of the eye stripe, how bold. And I've always found the color of the eye stripe being a pretty good indicator as well. Just kind of general color, especially compared to the sides of the bird, the flanks of the birds, and leg color. Louisiana famously having sort of bubblegum pink legs, and Northern having dingier brown legs. So when we talk about this bird, the legs, I'm not sure that they're giving us anything here. I would sort of lean Louisiana on this thing just because they look more pink than brown, though they are kind of classic tweener legs. So those are kind of ambiguous. Looking at the bill looks very large to me. This looks like a very substantial bill on this bird. So that's point for Louisiana. The eye line also looks very strong. It kind of keeps its width well beyond the eye. And kind of curls up a little bit. That's a line for Louisiana for me. The only thing that does not say Louisiana for me is I like to see a little bit of a kind of a rosy blush on the sides, on the flanks.
Kind of a ochreish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I don't see that in this bird, but I don't think that is enough to dissuade me from an identification of Louisiana water thrush for this bird.
Right, and here's a comparison of everything Nate was just talking about, with Louisiana on the left and Northern on the right. One thing you'll notice about Louisiana water thrush versus Northern on the bill is that the lower mandible is deeper and thicker, and it just gives a different impression The upper mandible is kind of the same, but the lower mandible is thicker in Louisiana, and it just gives it that sort of bigger,
That's what
almost
gives it that thick bill,
boat
thick
build look.
Yeah.
You know, the legs are typically bubblegum pink, as Nate said, but you know, look at the northern there; those legs aren't black for sure. They're some shade of rosyish, pinkish something. The overall color of the bird, I think that Louisiana tends to be a little more richly brownish olive on top, whereas northern tends to be just kind of flat brown.
I agree. It's sort of like the difference between a Swainson's thrush and a gray-cheeked thrush.
Yes.
You know, gray-cheeked thrush feels very cold, grayish brown, whereas Swainson's is richer. It's a similar sort of situation here.
Yes. And then what Nate talked about, the kind of ochreish buff wash on the flank, you can definitely see that on the bird on the left.
Yeah, for sure.
And also just the streaks. Look at how much more messy the northern water thrush is. The face pattern, the streaking underneath, everything is just a bit more messy than it is in the Louisiana. And then one last thing, as John Lowry notes on Facebook, is if you can see the throat, typically Louisiana has a white throat and northern has spotting in the throat. However, I've seen both species with either, but that's always
I agree.
a good...
Yeah, that's one of those field marks that is generally true, but I wouldn't like hinge an identification on that. But if it leans one way or the other, it's definitely something you can take into consideration if everything else is sort of checking out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there is the water thrush talk for
Alex
2022
Cruz notes, he just
in
saw
the books.
Northern water thrush. He just saw northern water thrush's local patch this morning, alerted by its chink call. Yeah, having a cold late spring in Minnesota, surprised to see in April. Yeah, that is interesting. I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, Louisiana water thrush is famously an extremely early migrant.
Yes.
They show up in March and like early March in the Southeast, and they're on territory by like March 10th or something in North Carolina, which is
and they're on their wintering
before.
grounds in August.
Exactly. They migrate that early in fall as well. If you see a water thrush past September 1st in anywhere except Florida, you can pretty well assume that it's a northern water thrush unless you have very good reason to believe otherwise. Whereas northern water thrush is much later in both cases. So yeah, you're right, Alex. That is kind of interesting that you would see a northern in April, especially as far north as Minnesota. We start seeing them in April around here, but their peak is definitely first week of May. Or
the Mississippi Valley and the Western Great Lakes. The last couple of weeks, we saw a big push of early warblers come in on that really. Fantastic for birding storm system that moved through with those high winds and high pressure, and it pushed a lot of birds up. And we've been finding all kinds of things in the Chicago area: worm-eating warblers, hooded warbler, blue grosbeaks, and just all kinds of things that have been pushed up a little bit earlier than might be expected. Because of that.
Another identification point brought up by Jeff Biermeyer at YouTube. He rightly notes that we talked about this in a podcast episode a couple years ago with Tom Johnson and Marky Muchler about kind of early spring identification challenges, which reminds me, it'd be fun to have them back on and do some more stuff like that, but that's not there. He notes that Tom said that when the eyebrow color matches the hip pocket, kind of the flanks, that it's a northern. And when it mismatches, it's a Louisiana. And this composite that you've thrown up, Greg, shows that really well.
Yeah,
it does. See how the eyebrow color and the northern is very similar to the kind of flanks on that bird, whereas on the Louisiana, as I said, it's got kind of that peachy apricot, ochre blush on the side. That's quite different from the eyebrow. Yeah, I like that clue.
Yeah. Alrighty. This is something that people birding in parks get a lot of this time of year. You've got a little bird in
sparrow.
You've got a little bird in some unmowed grass, and it's just kind of creeping around in there, and you're trying to get good looks at it. And it sticks its head up. And so, yes, you have given away that by bill shape and just sort of general coloration, I think we can narrow this down to one of the sparrows.
Yeah, I was gonna say this. This looks like that Cape May Warbler photo you showed.
But there's some things we can see here, and I'm going to use that word ochre again, that ochreish sort of color. We see, thank you. My wig isn't handy. But we can see that color quite a bit on this bird. We also see some kind of cold gray, some rich brown, and an eye ring. And all of those things, now that, somebody said, Stephen Schneider says chipping sparrow. So why isn't this a chipping sparrow?
Yeah, chipping sparrow is a good guess. There's a couple things that stand out for me against it. I do see a pretty extensive streaking on the front of this bird, whereas the chipping sparrow would be mostly clean on the breast. And the cap, there's clearly it's got that rufusy color on the sides, but there's a gray median stripe, whereas a chipping sparrow would be more of a clean, full cap.
Mm-hmm. And we wouldn't see the color on the breast. You see that ochreish buff across the breast. That definitely wouldn't see that on a chipping sparrow. And the eye ring, you really wouldn't. A chipping sparrow has kind of broken eye arcs with a black line through. At least in plumages that look like this. If this was a breeding adult chipping sparrow, it wouldn't look anything like this. But a bird in transitional plumage might. But then as this bird hops a little bit more in the grass and gives us a better look.
Oh, look at that.
Look at that. That is a Lincoln sparrow.
Indeed, Lincoln sparrow, yeah. Good bird for, an expected spring migrant in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
Which this is. Love that fine streaked plumage all over. I've said it before here. I will say it every time we talk about Lincoln sparrow. When we're talking about the other Melospises that are in the same genus that kind of have the similar sort of body shape and body build and frequently the same sort of habits. Lincoln sparrow looks like those streaks have kind of been drawn on with a really sharp pencil, a finely sharpened pencil. And song sparrow, which would be probably the likely mistake, likely similar species, looks like they're kind of drawn on with crayon, very thick, very coarse.
Yep, or pastels.
Yeah, this one's just so there's just like the fine markings of a Lincoln sparrow. I don't know. They're very aesthetically appealing.
I agree. And the color, the colors, when you can see one in nice plumage and nice light, that
sure.
buffy and cold gray and the kind of rich browns all mixed together on the bird is really beautiful. And it's got that nice eye ring and the really thin for a sparrow bill.
Yeah.
And they
I like them in
often
the
raise.
Fall. This is a spring, fresh plumage bird, but I like them in the fall when they've got, those, everything's kind of worn and they look just like all over kind of buff and gray. Nice. It's a nice look. It's a nice look.
And they also, speaking of look, they frequently raise their crown feathers like that more than other sparrows that you might confuse them with. And so that's a clue. Of course, any bird can raise its crown feathers like that, but Lincoln sparrows tend to do that more than others.
Yeah, they like to have that peaky-headed look. That's another clue. Yep.
And from the world-famous McGee Marsh in Ohio, which is the site of the biggest week in American birding, which is coming up. There you are, our very own Nate Swick. And actually, there's going to be a whole crew of ABA people out at the biggest week this year. So if you're going to be attending the biggest week, stop by our booth and say hello. We will have some announcements that we're pretty thrilled about.
Oh yeah, we got some big stuff coming.
We got some big stuff to talk about. And then shortly after that,
I'm hoping that this COVID illness clears, so I can.
You'll be fine.
Fingers crossed, folks. Fingers crossed.
You'll be fine. And then while we're talking about festivals, the ABA will also have a presence at the Indiana Dunes Birding Festival, which is in Indiana, obviously, which is right sort of after or kind of during the biggest week. And around the weekend of May 14th, 15th. And that is a wonderful, wonderful festival. There's great birding in the Indiana Dunes. And the guides, the people running it, are all top notch, and you're going to have a lot of fun. And they have some fun little side jaunts up to Tawas to see Kirtland's warbler and a few other birds. So that's a really good time. So we got McGee Marsh is famous.
Busy May. But yeah, let's talk about McGee Marsh is famous for yellow warblers.
It's famous for warblers, period.
It is specifically the yellow warbler capital of the world. There's so many yellow warblers there.
You could, if you could take all the yellow warblers at McGee Marsh, you could build a substantial bridge out of them.
Yes, absolutely.
There's that many. But so here we have
747.
Here we have a female. I kind of blew that one. We have a yellowish warbler.
Yellowish warbler. Yeah, this is a yellow warbler lowercase.
Yeah. So it's not a yellow warbler because we're seeing some things here. This is a very clear photograph, and we can see some. The crown is kind of dark. It's got dark in the face, but between the bill and the eye, the bill is yellow warbler has kind of a longer bill.
Yeah, this is a substantial bill for a warbler.
Yellow warbler has also a shorter tail and has more yellow. I mean, it's called yellow warbler for a reason.
It is the yellowest warbler.
And this bird has a kind of a longish tail. And if you squint at it, it's got a kind of a, look at the face pattern where it's like me here. It's kind of almost wearing a hoodie. Clue. So I'm going to skip right now to the comparison shot of this bird, and that I put together this morning. And so here it is on the right. And it is compared to a female hooded warbler on top left and a female Wilson's warbler at bottom left. And
I'm really glad you got that action shot of the female hooded warbler because that feels somewhat important to the identification of this bird.
It is. And that's one thing that when you're seeing a bird, and we talk about this fairly frequently here, when you're seeing a bird in the field, it'll often give you substantial clues, sometimes in this case slam dunk what the bird is, that a single photograph will not give you. And the bird will be much more confusing in a single photograph than it is actually looking at it in the field. So a female hooded warbler and Wilson's warbler look very similar. But the hooded warbler has those bright white outer tail feathers, and they flash them constantly. They flick their tail open, and as they bounce around, quite honestly, even though they're bright and yellow, that flash of white may be the very first thing you see. And there's been some pretty interesting theories about what they're doing. One theory is that as they bounce around, they flash that tail to startle bugs so that they can see them and catch them faster. But comparing the Wilson's warbler on the left to the bird on the right, you'll notice that the head pattern is a little bit different. This bird has more of a yellow supercilium than it does a yellow face, and the tail is shorter. So the bird on the right, the mystery bird here, is a female hooded warbler.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. I'll be honest, I was kind of leaning Wilson's warbler, but I see what you're saying. I don't see too many Wilson's warblers where I live in North Carolina. They're kind of an uncommon migrant.
It's also early for Wilson's warbler.
Yeah.
Wilson's tends to be, at least in the East, it tends to be one of our later migrants.
I will...
Now, also, Wilson's also has...
I'll defer to you, though.
Wilson's also tends to have a smaller bill, which is kind of obvious in these photos, too.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that really when you put this compilation up, it is pretty clear how small that Wilson's Warbler bill is, and I'm not sort of in love with the way that the black sort of sits on top of this bird for Wilson's. I think it's sort of an illusion, not an illusion, but I think that's just the way the bird is sitting kind of makes it look like it's more kind of in a Wilson's Warbler place as opposed to a hooded warbler place. Yeah, all right, I'll go with it.
All right,
I'm convinced.
And I think that may be it for us.
Was that it? Was that the last one?
That was it.
All right.
That was that. So on to your questions and thoughts here.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to let us know. We are happy to talk birds for another 10 minutes or so. Otherwise, I'll just while you're getting your questions, while you're letting your brain work, I will use this opportunity to promote a couple things. First of which, your membership in the American Birding Association helps us do fun bird stuff like this with you and stuff for you. That includes, what's this bird, all of our free resources, the podcast, a lot of other cool projects that we're working on that we're going to reveal in the next couple of weeks. But, we couldn't do it without our members. Membership is a huge part of what we do. And if you want to help us out, you can go to aba.org/join right above Greg's head and help support us. Another thing, if you enjoy just kind of chatting about birds, please check out the American Birding Podcast, which is hosted by me. And you can find that wherever podcasts are found, wherever your preferred podcast dispensary is.
The best natural history podcast out there, in my humble opinion.
I don't know. There's some good stuff out there.
There is some good stuff out there.
A lot more nature podcasts out there than there used to be. So it is a
Jeff Blanchard.
Full term. Yeah,
Jeff Blanchard brings up a question about avian flu, and neither one of us is really qualified to talk about that.
I will talk about what I've heard. My father-in-law is a veterinary epidemiologist, and he was talking a great deal about this while I was in Florida with my family last week. And I think that, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has put out all about birds, I should say, has put out a really good primer about what people should and can expect with this avian flu. It really does seem to be primarily concerning to people who have chickens, people who keep domestic chickens. I know a lot of people do that now, but it's currently it is a big deal for domestic chicken stock, and less concerning for wild birds. I know a lot of departments of ag and departments of wildlife have put out a lot of prescriptions about kicking feeders down. My sense is that the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has the right of this. If you have chickens, if you keep domestic chickens, I would suggest taking your feeders down. If you do not keep chickens, or none of your neighbors keep chickens, I think you're probably in the clear. There doesn't seem to be affecting wild bird populations all that much, with the exception of maybe those large concentrations of waterfowl, which for the most part have vacated the parts of the continent where people live. We don't have too many of those around anymore.
We did have,
if you keep chickens, I would get rid of your feeders, but otherwise I think you're all right.
In northern Illinois, we did have an incident with a good number of cormorants at one lake dying of avian flu.
Do you know how many?
I want to say like 30.
My sense is that it's a relatively small proportion of the wild bird population. There was some stuff about, a few dozen bald, like maybe 3 dozen bald eagles that were killed by it. It's concerning. But I think for wild bird feeders, I think you're probably safe to leave them up, provided you're doing the due diligence of keeping your feeders and your feeding station relatively clean and whatnot. The regular stuff that you should be doing anyway. Some questions. People are asking some questions.
We do. Yeah. Susan Nelson says she's interested in bird behavior as well as IDing.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a resource for recording behavior? For instance, mockingbirds are very visible until they have babies in the nest, and then they become secretive. Also, some species seem to be more tolerant of human presence than others. Well, what you said about the mockingbirds there, Susan, that goes for pretty much every bird.
Yeah, blue jays also are kind of notorious for that too. Big and loud and out there, and as soon as they have chicks, they're like gone for 6 weeks.
Silent.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a lot of great books about bird behavior out there. There's some from Houghton Mifflin in the Peterson line. I believe Princeton has a couple.
Yeah.
If you are an ABA member, Birding Magazine and North American Birds frequently carry articles on specific behaviors
if you are a subscriber to Birds of the World, which is the Cornell Lab of Ornithology resource, ABA members actually get a discount to joining that. It is like just an enormous resource full of bird stuff for like monographs for like they're trying to do every species of bird in the world, which feels like a unsurmountable task.
They're getting pretty close. I flip through it every week or so, and It is an amazing resource. And yes,
actually,
if you are,
I talked to Brian Sullivan the other day. And he's gonna be on the podcast soon. So if you're interested,
right on. Right on. But yeah, that's something that Susan, you should definitely get a subscription to All About Birds. Or no, it's not All About Birds. It's Birds of the World.
Birds of the World.
Right.
Birdsoftheworld.org. Yeah.
All About Birds is the free and open sort of little bits of information. Birds of the World is the in-depth one that you need a subscription for. And as Nate mentioned, ABA members get a discount on that subscription to Birds of the World.
That's right. Holly Miner has a question. Saw Sparrow having trouble deciding whether it was a song or Lincoln's. Couldn't see much beside the head because it was foraging on the ground and grasses. Wouldn't the Lincolns be more likely with it down on the ground? Maybe not necessarily, maybe, but probably not necessarily to the extent that you could use that as an identification a tool. I've seen both of them kind of foraging on the ground in equal measure.
Yeah, you got to get a look. You got to, as we discussed the field marks of Lincoln Sparrow a few minutes ago. You got to get that kind of a look at it to see, what the color of the breast and the streaking and everything.
With regard to the hooded warbler that we just talked about, Jim Fiermeyer says, I wish there was a compilation someplace of all the birds with white outer tail feathers. That'd be cool. The closest thing I can think of is the warbler guide that came out a few years ago, where they have the really cool tail plates that were drawn by Catherine Hamilton. The Peterson Guide to Warblers does that as well. But yeah, that'd be cool to have everything, right? All songbirds with. Oh, that reminds me, there was a book that came out this past year called I have it right next to me, Flight Identification of European Passerines and Select Land Birds. It's basically like flight ID of all. It is what it says on the tin. It's flight ID of all the land birds, but it's got like nice spread tail and spread wing images of all these European all these passerines, and it is such a cool book. And I wish we had something like that in North America. So we kind of do, and I realize we're running up against time here, but my personal favorite field guide for North America north of Mexico is the Sibley Guide, and Sibley does show every passerine in flight from dorsal and ventral view, underwing and upper wing. He does, and I love Sibley.
He does a very good job of that. So we do kind of have that
stuff out. Yeah, but man, like, look at this. Look at this.
Okay,
isn't that cool?
That is very cool.
That's good stuff.
That is very cool.
America. Look, we just need more cool bird books. That's all I need. That's all.
That's true.
Princeton University Press, you're our only hope. You're the last one standing. How Mifflin is out of the nature books business.
Yeah. So we are running up on the hour here, the witching hour for us. And before we go, I do want to give a shout out. We do occasionally to Larkwire If you are,
yeah, we didn't get to talk about it this time.
If you are, as the birds are starting to sing now, and you want to learn bird song, get yourself Larkwire on your phone. It is an awesome little game that will teach you bird song, and it is indispensable.
And Larkwire, if you want to pay us to plug your project, please get in touch.
Yeah, we're going to do it anyways, but we'll do it more if you actually pay us.
That's right.
But it is a great tool. Yeah. Thanks, Alex.
Anyway, yeah, please consider joining the ABA if you haven't already. Thank you everybody for joining us. This was a good discussion. A lot of cool stuff. Enjoy spring, man. It is out there. It's happening. I can't wait till this illness clears for me and I can get out and enjoy it. If you're going to be at Biggest Week or at Indiana Dunes, please stop by and say hello. We'd love to see you. Listen to the podcast, all this stuff.
Yeah. Things are shaping up for a really good spring. Get out there and enjoy it.
Absolutely.
And that is it for us. Thank you all. And